Welcome back, everyone, to Progressively Incorrect. I am your host, Zach Groeschel, and I am so excited about today's episode. You know, with this podcast, I've never really interviewed anyone that I actually know. I've gotten to know them through the podcast, and nobody I've ever actually worked with. So I'm very excited for John Tanner's episode that I'm going to bring you in just a moment. But before that, really quick sponsorship stuff. As you know, this podcast is brought to you by John Catt Educational, which publishes some of the best books in education, including my book, Just Tell Them, The Power of Explanations and Explicit Teaching. Go ahead and check out the links in the show notes for the catalog, John Catt's catalog of all their various books for this year, and start your evidence-based learning journey. The second thing I want to bring up is that I have a lot of events coming up this year and in the future through my role as the director of Step Lab North America. I would like you to go ahead and check out the links to those events, and you can get to them through educationrickshaw.com/coach and get yourself trained up in instructional coaching. I would love to see you at some of the events I'm hosting. And without further ado, let's go ahead and turn over to John. John, how are you doing today?
Zach, I'm doing really well. Really good seeing you. And I got a 4-day weekend, so this is a great way to begin
it. Yeah, I'm looking out. It's a little snowy. It's looking nice. At least here in Tacoma, it's looking nice. We've worked together as teachers, and I have so many questions because you have a book and you have a story that I think is going to be extremely fascinating and interesting to my audience. Go ahead and introduce yourself first, and we'll get started.
I guess officially I am Dr. John F. Tanner. I rarely ever use my title of doctor, but I do have it. And I got that from the University of Texas at El Paso in 2006. I have been in education since 1993. I had an unplanned, sabbatical from it from about 2014 until just about 2 or 3 years ago. I'm very, very passionate on the subject, and I have a lot of opinions that I think are based on research about it. Part of the reason I'm passionate is just my upbringing from El Paso, Texas, where I grew up in a community and environment that was basically working class to upper middle class in a predominantly Hispanic, Mexican-American culture.
Love it. Love it. And right now you're teaching, but a majority of your work that we're going to be talking about is what you did as a principal. I want you to start with this and maybe use real specific examples of what you did to answer this question. Tell me about what it takes to turn around a struggling school.
If you are going into a struggling school, you have to know that when you are going in there, you have to have the arrogance to believe you have the catalyst type of power in you that is going to change the school around. And you know that you are going to be challenging people a lot because there are going to be so many coming to you to tell you why the school can't improve. They will be telling you it's their demographics. You don't understand our kids. If everybody understood what we had, then you would understand. You'll see. And you've got to go in there with a attitude of, no, our kids are just as good as everybody else. And I love this old phrase, the parents aren't keeping the good ones at home. You know, it's we can get our kids to where they need to be. And then you keep on championing that by not getting mad at the people you're working with. You're depending on them to work with them to get kids to the next level. Once they start seeing that their myths and that their stereotypes of the kids are not true, and they start seeing their kids performing better, then you have the biggest converts. And once you have the converts on that team that are seeing it's like, wow, look at what our kids are doing, then your school is going to change, and it is going to change dramatically.
Maybe you can tell us about like some of those specific things that you did to sort of get your school off and running.
I was able to do it both at the middle school level, and I was very successful at some middle schools that were struggling to the point that I was then taken to a high school. So I'll start it with my high school story. Every other high school feel really good about themselves. We were the worst in everything. We were the worst in academics. We were the worst in the fine arts. We were the worst in just about everything you can imagine. A few sports here and there were pretty good, but we made other people feel very good about themselves. When I got there, it was a school of about 1,600 kids, and that the most recent graduating class had 188 graduates. I don't think I have to do the math there for anybody. I mean, it was bad. And the school was, and this was in Texas by the state, it was getting ready to shut down. But there wasn't really that much worry in the district, save for very few people. It was, that's just the way it is here. And I remember when getting to the school of giving my plans to the teachers, letting them know where we stood, it was shocking how many did not realize how bad it was. They didn't understand where we were in relation to the other schools in the area. And then they came up with all the reasons of why we were so bad and it just wasn't going to improve. So it was first getting in with that line and then asking the teachers, it's like, do you really believe we're that bad? Is your teaching so bad that you can't get kids to learn the material? Then we brought it to the students. I think that was the biggest game changer. When the kids saw how they stood against their peers at other schools, embarrassment set in. I always loved those kids. They were just amazing. They took it on themselves and they said, no, we're not going to be the reason this school shuts down. We're going to be the reason this school stays open. And I mean, it can sound like a fairy tale story, and in many ways it was, but that school had a huge shift, just an enormous shift. The one that I'm most proud of is how many kids we started getting going to college. By my last year there, 92% of my senior class had been admitted to at least one 4-year university, which was just phenomenal in a place that traditionally, that one year when I went in the year before, out of that 188, there were only 16 kids who either went to 4-year or 2-year college after graduation. And everybody was okay with it. It was just like, oh, our kids don't go to school. And it was this thing of let's get them taking the ACT. Let's get them prepared. Let's get our counselors set up to where we're going to get them to apply to at least go to one 4-year school, which was the University of Texas, El Paso. And we changed our mission statement and our vision statement to all students will have the opportunity to attend a 4-year university upon graduation.
Love it. And one of the things you talked about, because we both were teaching math at the same time, was how you focused on math, which of course is a subject that many people would associate with, I guess, elitism, or that it's not a subject that students in poverty need necessarily for life. And so, yeah, maybe you could go ahead and talk about that.
Well, I guess what I'll start with is looking at No Child Left Behind. I want to make it clear. My politics are liberal. I lean to the left. I believe in public education. I do not believe in vouchers. I do not believe in charter schools. We have everything we need to get our kids educated to the level we need to get them educated to. And my whole mindset is in a public school setting, especially in a poor public school setting, we were totally Title I school. In a public school setting, it is my job to ensure that there is going to be equal opportunity for a piece of the American pie. In No Child Left Behind, No Child Left Behind set some of the parameters for us. Whether I liked it at the time or not didn't matter. It's what was my guideline. And it said kids had to pass a minimal standards test to be able to get to their next level. And we were not doing it for math. And one of the things that George W. Bush, I'm not a fan, but he did say one thing that he converted me on. When there was this idea of we have to have a sliding scale of who gets to pass the test and who doesn't, he looked at that, he goes, that's soft racism. If we're going to say that our kids are just equal to each other, regardless of economic status, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of color of skin, you don't do a sliding scale of who passes or not. You either pass or you don't. So when it came to math, whether it's elitist or not, there was a test that had to be passed, and our kids weren't passing it. And yet I go into a school that has a schedule that is only, if you're taking any type of math class, you're only getting 45 minutes, or no, at that point they had a block schedule. They were getting 73 minutes every other day. If you start doing the math on it, it doesn't work. It just absolutely doesn't work. And then when you start looking at a block schedule for a heterogeneous community that is impoverished, you're looking at the worst type of schedule possible. So the first thing that I did there was I changed it back to a traditional schedule, and I took one elective away and I doubled math. So our kids, especially at the freshman and sophomore level, if they were taking Algebra 1 or geometry, they were getting 90 minutes of math every day, 5 days a week. What do you know? The scores soared. The more time you put into instruction, the more instructors you get, you decrease the size of the classes, the kids start learning.
And it's crazy because we worked at a school that I think we could say that there's just ongoing kind of pushback or sort of grappling with some of these concepts. What sort of pushback can you expect when you're successful, when you show high growth in math, or you show that that your absenteeism goes down and you start seeing some graduation rates go up and so on and so forth? What kind of things do sort of pops up out of that kind of success?
On the positive side, my community got to a point they would die for me. Even got a call one time from the police department of saying, "What is going on at your school? The crime rate has gone down." And it's just like, wow, that's pretty awesome. And I could give a whole bunch of answers for that, of things that we had done at the school. But gosh, we were giving some kids hope. And we were showing it's like, you do have a future. Here's where you can go with this. And so within the community, there was just kudos all over the place. And at the state level, that was just looking at data, we got two distinctions. One was we had the highest rate of students in the state of Texas to receive a Pell Grant. And we were one of the highest as far as college readiness. Not that our kids were smarter than others. We hadn't attained that point yet, but we had 100% of our seniors who had completed either an ACT or SAT at least once, most of them multiple times. So we had those two distinctions going for us. And because our scores increased so much, we got a distinction that the state of Texas gave that we were a recognized campus. And we did that in 2 years. On the negative side, these schools that used to love to compete against us because they always won, and we made them feel great about themselves, they didn't like it too much. There was a state senator in Texas. It absolutely deconstructed what his plan was after he was a senator of what he was going to do in public schools. He wanted to see himself as a savior, and pretty much had a money-making scheme of how he was going to put in grants and stuff to schools that were struggling. And when he saw we weren't struggling, instead of saying, wow, congratulations, he went out on an attack without warning, without anything, and publicly said the reason we were doing better was because we were cheating. No evidence, no nothing, never spoke to me, just went with that. And so it was the mindset of, this school is so bad, there's no way they could have gotten better without something being wrong with it. So there was that side. And as I was fighting that, there was a distinguished person within the community who eventually even became mayor of the city. When I was talking to him about our results at our school, I was trying to tell him, the kids we were getting into college that were starting to go to UT Austin, few kids that we got into MIT, We were just starting to get kids going to some great places. And his response was, and he meant it, he was not joking. He's going, well, then where are we going to get the day laborers?
Wow. That's really interesting. The and really disappointing. So you said that they basically were saying publicly, like there was just some sort of whispers, the school's got to be cheating, that they can't actually, these results just can't be the result of their efforts. But this sort of blew up. This became actually much larger than just rumors or whispers. What sort of thing happened in terms of the sort of cheating scandal that you experienced?
Yeah, it became the EPISD cheating scandal to this day. So the seeds of this start in 2010. It's all over now, everything is done, but to this day, never was I asked, what did you do to increase scores? That is a question that has never been asked. Since all charges were dropped and everything, we were exonerated and what have you, there has never been a story in the local newspaper in El Paso that ever said that happened. This really exploded into this cheating scandal that got the Department of Justice involved, the DOJ, the FBI. And I mean, they ruined quite a few lives on this. Our lives were definitely, if not put on hold and compromised for a while, I mean, just really put a dent into what we were doing. And I think what upset them the most was that there was not one of us who was involved with this that were ever going to say we did anything wrong, because we didn't. And it was amazing. I worked with amazing people, and we all said the same thing. Let me serve time instead of saying I'm guilty for something I didn't do. And I think with us staying with that, having some really excellent defenders on our side. And because there was no evidence against us, nothing, it was trying to do hyperbole, emotion, what have you. There was nothing that could be done but drop the charges, even to a point that the main prosecutor was reprimanded for what she did in this case.
And have you seen other, as you kind of explored and you had to suffer the consequences of this, being accused of something you didn't do? Were there other examples of this that happened in the United States kind of around the same time where for similar reasons, or in where, were they exonerated? Were there real instances of cheating? I'm sure, I'm curious what you learned as you read during this time you were kind of off.
Well, I think the most prominent example would have been the cheating scandal of the Atlanta public schools. And in that one, maybe perhaps there was a cheating that went on of teachers who got together who erased wrong answers and put them to right answers. But what wasn't reported in that one was that it was a statewide issue, and yet the only district that was focused on was Atlanta, no one else. There was no, even though there were plenty of Caucasian white districts that were doing the exact same thing as Atlanta, none of them got in trouble. None of them were indicted. Nobody lost their jobs. But when you get to the Black teachers and Black superintendent of Atlanta, who tended to be in areas of high desirable real estate, those teachers, those educators were focused on, and they were so bombarded with false accusations, with so much that you're just kind of going, what happened there? To a point, there was a woman named Shawnee Robinson. To prove her innocence, I only have to tell you one thing about her. She was a first grade teacher. First grade testing is meaningless in any type of testing situation. It's not accountable testing. And she got indicted and she got convicted, and there was nothing to tie her to it. She was, and instead of the Atlanta courts, instead of them admitting that maybe we did something wrong, they kept her in limbo on appeal from 2015 to just maybe a few months ago.
It's crazy. And I'm so happy you said you were exonerated. We should we should celebrate that first of all, right? You weren't guilty of anything. But it seems like it's not just like, you know, uh use a cheating scandal to take down these schools, but there's all sorts of soft ways that kind of come out, blaming the fact that the students' progress is based on the number of English language learners, for example. They can learn faster, or saying that the school excludes children, or that the school does X, Y, and Z. It just seems like we don't like a success story like this. We want to find reasons to excuse why these schools could be, successful. I kind of wanted you to dig in a little more on that, how you see that playing out.
Gosh, we can even talk about what's currently happening within our own country right now, the xenophobia that happens towards immigrant children. And it was definitely back then when you're going into Texas. And, this is a story that starts from the time that Reagan gave full immunity and total welcoming to undocumented immigrants that were already in the country. And the fear that came, it's like, they don't know English. They don't know this. They don't know that. And it's just like, yeah, but it doesn't mean they don't know a language. It doesn't mean that they can't function. It doesn't mean any of that. And I guess I had the advantage of growing up in a city that was mostly Hispanic, and all my friends spoke English and they spoke Spanish too. And then when I became an educator in the city, when people would come from out of town, they would be so worried because it's like, well, these kids don't know English. They're all speaking Spanish. And it's like, well, go up to them and speak English, and I bet you they'll answer you in English too. And don't worry, I bet your kids are going to pick up some Spanish while they're here. It's like, and what do you know? We have a bilingual city there. And when you're looking at the fear that was with Texas of all these Hispanics who are coming up, the peso devaluation that happened in Mexico that created a great migration into Texas, so many people do not realize that the state of Texas is majority Hispanic at this point, especially if you're looking at ages 50 and younger. And guess what? Their economy's booming. They're doing just fine. And I look at it just in my own life, in my schooling, and I think I got a pretty darn good education. My English teachers were Hispanic. My math teachers were Hispanic. My U.S. history teachers were Hispanic. My doctors were Hispanic. It's like, I think I got really, really good services from a Hispanic population that people have absolutely said horrible things about that are just not true in any way whatsoever.
And so you see this in sort of schools where we start to like break teachers out and we start looking at achievement by race or by so on and so forth, and we talk about these graphs. And you've sat next to me and we've looked at the graphs, and then we're sort of encouraged to try to come up with some sort of causes. And these root causes are never have to do with teaching, right? We could teach them better. We could increase time on task. We could increase it always ends up being like, well, we change textbooks, or, a lot of my kids take math in the afternoon, or worse, just these kids, gosh, they're sabotaging us. It's their fault. It's just in this community, they're not really academically oriented, and so on and so forth. I mean, you've said that poverty is not an excuse for learning or an academic achievement. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, poverty is not an excuse for a kid not to learn. If somebody is born with a cognitive disability, there might be an excuse not to be able to learn algebra or calculus or ever be able to fully read Shakespeare. But if somebody's born poor, that doesn't exclude them from learning. Somebody's economic level does not inherently cause a lower IQ. And I think we love to equate that. And what happens so often, and it's not saying that those communities don't have some separate challenges that need to be looked at, but what happens so often is some of the worst teachers who have had no success anywhere end up in those communities because they have been allowed to use the excuse of, it's not me, it's them. And we have a culture that is willing to say, yeah, I get that. That's probably true. instead of saying, gosh, we got to work harder and we can get them there. And then we start focusing more on their emotional needs than their academic needs, despite the fact that there's no teacher or even counselor that are going into the schools there that are prepared or trained to deal with the emotional issues that are going on in an impoverished environment. I had a superintendent who I thought was really good. He was, nuts and bolts on it. And we were in a school district. It was the second poorest zip code in the United States at that time. It's not anymore. These people have definitely pulled themselves up by their bootstraps. But one of the things he would tell the educators there is the best therapy you can give to these students is to teach the subject you've been hired to teach. English teacher, you have not been hired to counsel your kids. You've been hired to teach them English. And when you are teaching them that, you are giving them the skills that they can get out of the impoverished situation that they're in. If you are putting that to the side, you are giving them a double whammy. You're letting them know that they have a reason to have a crutch and a reason not to succeed. And you are then not teaching them what they're still needing to know. So let's get to where we need to know, and let's break this cycle of poverty, because if we're looking at the great part of America, we break cycles of poverty. People are able to move up a socioeconomic ladder, and we're able to do it through public education. Nothing besides public education has created a middle class. And if we lose this, I don't think it's too far to say, we lose public education, we lose America.
You mentioned kind of talking about their emotions, which of course, like there's a long history of this, of like self-esteem education and so on, and it's just mutated into a big mess. But I go into your classroom and I see a well-run classroom. I see discipline not in the form of punishment. I see discipline as the students have become disciplined in their thinking, in their organization, in their writing. They can come in and have an opportunity in the chaos of the hallway just outside, an opportunity to sit in their thoughts and write some stuff down to start a lesson, and then you get started right away. It just seems like that the emotions and the self-esteem are best provided for when you give students that sort of support, the support of a calm and productive learning environment with a teacher who, of course, is coaching them to be their best selves. I mean, is that how you see it? More of an integrated way than give teachers a bunch of social emotional PowerPoints and have them do emotions lessons when they could be teaching math?
I mean, first and foremost, and here's where my left side comes out. Here's where my liberal stuff comes out. Those kids need to know I love them like my own children. They need to know that I care about them as a human being. And if I don't, I'm in the wrong profession. And as I'm caring about them, they need to know that I'm caring about the subject I am teaching them. And what middle schooler is going to understand the psychobabble of these lessons that are given on emotional, what have you? What they are going to understand is when I'm looking at them, I'm going, look at that. You got it. You didn't think you could. And look, you did that. Look at what you did. And then you see that beam on their face, and then they try harder. It's just this whole thing of creating. It's like, we're here to learn. Let's do it. It's fun, and you can do it.
It's hard to explain that, I think, to a career climbing kind of administrator who hears from the top, like the best way to boost these scores is to address the underlying needs or something, the unmet needs that are psychological, that are emotional based. But then this sort of intertwined vision of addressing students' self-esteem and by giving them a sense of accomplishment, by giving them a chance to see the fruits of their labor. It's really tough to argue that and fight that fight. I don't really get it.
It really is. And it's just like, I have 45 to 50 minutes a day with them. That's it. That is it. I do not have the rest of their time that they're at home in whatever condition they're in. They don't remember me when I'm there, and they're definitely not going to remember what I have said for their social emotional health. If they're in a really, really horrible situation, I wish there was more I can do, but I can't. But I can teach them what they're needing to know so they can get that skill so that they can get themselves out of that situation. And do I have examples of kids like that? Absolutely. When the kids start seeing that that education is their way out of their situation and that they can start making on their own, maybe even by the age of 18, if they get that scholarship, if they get, the stuff that's available, they can get there. How many kids I knew? One kid, she's an attorney in DC. She got her law degree from Georgetown, and her senior year in high school, she was living in her car. And it's just this determination of I can make it. When she got her full ride to the state school and was then able to live in a dorm, she had housing. And then she goes, I can do the rest. I can now do the rest. And boy, has she.
So what I'm hearing is like a kind of a recipe coming together, which fits in with a lot of the other episodes, which is that let's focus back on achievement. Let's not excuse achievement because of poverty, which by the way, that's what the no excuses charters, that's what originally what it was meant to be, but it's sort of morphed or it got politicized. And then you also focus on making sure that your timetabling and the structures in your building are conducive for for lots of time on task. And you focus back on the content, what the students need to learn. Tell me a little bit about behavior and how that intersects, because we know that struggling schools tend to have behavior that prohibits attention and on-task behavior. So I'm very curious about that.
Structure is really, really important. I always say this, and it can really upset people, but I'm just going to say it. Texas public education on discipline is more progressive than Washington. And by progressive, they also have better run schools. I am really shocked in Washington of all the things we let go by the wayside that we don't address. And then when we finally do address it, it's so draconian that the kid doesn't get an education at all. And what we then see is this graduation rate where you're going, what? We're one of the richest states in the country, and we have a poor graduation rate with Caucasian students, not to mention everybody else. And it's just like, what are we doing? And then it's not the question of what are we doing, it's what we're not doing. So teachers need to have rules in their class. They need to be fair. They need to be clear. They need to be black and white. Students are ready to follow or not follow the rules. They're willing to do it. I love this one philosophy, and I tried to use it my whole education career. I am going to give high, 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 high praise for many, many, many things with a very low level of tolerance for negative behavior. When you're doing that, you're getting kids to get on board. It even helps teaches parents how to parent. When you have that and you have an administration that has enough tools to work with, then you're going to have a school that's going to be running pretty well. But when we have those kids who cannot follow the system, we don't have ISS, we don't have in-school suspension, we don't have an alternative program. Instead of those things, we keep on putting these kids who are so disrupted back into a classroom until a point that we get them expelled or hope that they're going to move away or hope that they're going to do this, that, or the other, instead of providing an environment that can get them the social skills that could put them back into a general ed class. By not doing it, that is our pathway to prison.
Wow.
I could go on maybe for about another 3 hours on it. Should I talk about ADHD?
I actually do. I want you to talk about ADHD, and I want you to talk about, in particular, your approach to coaching and mentoring boys? Because I know that often when we talk about behavior, we're talking about the disproportionate number of incidents that are committed by boys.
Oh my goodness. And we're still talking in our country about the need to level the playing field in education between girls and boys, as if girls are still needing more intervention so that they can get to the level of boys and have the advantages of it, of boys, without realizing we solved that problem about 35 years ago. And all you need to do is just look at who's in college today. When I started college in the early 1980s, it was about 50% females to 50% males in our nation's universities. I think today the stat is 61% are female and 39% are male. We have had a drastic reduction in males going to college. So we've already done that part. The other part that is done is intervention, and you even see it intervention in public schools, is experimenting with all girls schools. But you don't see any experimentation with all boys schools. And so I actually did this the other day. I went, how many all boy high schools are there in the state of Washington? Do you know what that answer is?
What is it?
One. And it's O'Day Catholic School in Seattle is the only all boys school in the entire state of Washington. And for all girl academies, I think there's 11. And so we have just so de-emphasized the boy education on it. We needed to make education conducive to the way girls learn. As we did it, we took away what made boys learn, and actually sometimes criminalized it. One of the huge things that was taken away was competition. Boys thrive on competition, and I realize girls don't thrive on it as much. Can we do both in the same building? You can, you really can. But when you take one away, you're taking for half of your population the reason that they were starting to learn anyway. I mean, come on, we as guys, we don't care about learning. We don't care about the world until we're 26. But you make it into a competition, I'll learn why, King Lear did what he did. Put it into a game of Jeopardy. I will learn it. The math skills will come. You make math into a competition for all those guys who aren't good at sports, but they want to show that they have prowess in something. Give them an academic course where they can show up their friends in the classroom. They'll do it. But instead, we have created an environment where boys are allowed to be C students. They're allowed to show their anger, but we make fun of them if they want to go into student government. We make fun of them if they are making great grades. And then there's the one that just, oh my God, I cannot believe it is done in this state. Let's not have honor roll. Let's not put kids' names up who are making the All A or the All AB honor roll. Let's not have National Junior Honor Society, because we're going to make other kids who don't make those grades feel bad. Yet at the same time, we have no problem honoring athletes at all these pep assemblies. And we don't think about the non-athlete feeling bad that they're not getting recognition. But let's not recognize our academic students.
Your sort of approach and philosophy around this, I think, is why the boys in your class will just like die at the sword for you, right? That's why they right? That's why, because you've given them a chance to express themselves in a way that's productive, and it's not sort of anti-intellectual, like I think a lot of sort of approaches are. But so it's fun to say how little we're learning and how dumb this lesson is, right? And so on and so forth. That's the cool way. I feel like teachers kind of perpetuate sort of negative views towards academics in response to the kids' initial impressions with the subject matter. And you mentioned ADHD, and I just want to make sure you bring that in, because that is off. Number one, you work with a lot of students who have that diagnosis or express those behaviors in other classes. How do you deal with sort of children who really are fighting back against the lesson also, or just have can always admit they can't pay attention. They just, and do we give them separate provision? Do we give them separate tasks? How do you deal with that?
Well, I look at it, it's don't get me wrong, we had a lot wrong in education in the 1970s when I was going through school, but I have never been officially diagnosed with ADHD, but I think I would qualify. And I think that's also the point of we really don't have a test for ADHD, but my goodness, do we get a lot of doctors who are giving this diagnosis? So here's a stat that I just learned maybe about 2 weeks ago. There are more people in the city of Philadelphia who are on Adderall, Ritalin, or Concerta than there are in the entire country of France. We so overdiagnose ADHD. And when we see how the diagnosis came about, there was not a scientific method. This was off somebody's observation, and they just came up with this thing. When I started working in this one poor school district with this superintendent who said, I think, just a lot of right on things, my background in public schools before going into this district as an administrator was I was a special ed teacher for behavior students. And so the ADHD moniker was definitely there. And when I'm coming in with that background, he goes, oh, ADHD doesn't happen in poor school districts. We don't have those kids. I'm laughing. And he goes, oh, you're laughing now. You'll agree with me later. And I did. I did agree with him later. It's like when you have poor kids who can't afford a doctor who are going to give that diagnosis, what do you know? The behavior isn't there. Or we know how to deal with what that behavior is. Or sometimes it's just growing up. And there are times that, I mean, to this day, sometimes I have to tell myself, shut your brain down and start focusing on concentrating, get the focusing going. And, ADHD is not a disorder. We've turned it into one, but it's not a disorder. The one thing that just can really irk me is when you get a kid qualifying for special ed because of ADHD. There's no qualifying component to get somebody into special ed for ADHD unless you go to this category, this catch-all category of other health impairment. And when you're doing that, that is an absolute, what do you want to call it? It's a cop-out. It's a cop-out when you don't want to deal with your kid on that. And what is our solution to it? Let's give drugs that mess with the gray matter of the brain. And I know contemporary thought with some people is saying, well, it's not as bad as we thought it was. It's like, well, yeah, it is. They're still Schedule II drugs. We're giving Schedule II drugs to 7 and 8-year-old boys. Would we give morphine to them? Would we give them cocaine? Those are Schedule II drugs also. But we give them those drugs despite anything else that's going on so that we hope that their behavior is going to get better. And I say to boys because we really don't give it to girls. When we're looking at the ADHD medication that's given in this country, 96% of the time is given to boys, not to girls. And then when it's messing with their gray matter, and by the time they're in high school, they're no longer a behavior problem in class, but they're not going to class. They have become zombies. They have become failure to launch. They don't care about anything. And I think it's part of the phenomenon that we've heard about for so long of boys, especially the last two generations, with a failure to launch.
Absolutely. Well, what I would like to give you a chance to do is kind of close with sort of a call to action. You've now started working in Washington and you were in Texas, and you've seen so many decades of underachieving schools and excuses and so on and so forth. Just what do you think is needed in these kind of tumultuous times to kind of move the school system forward and actually improve outcomes for kids?
So here is the really good news of it all. We really have, through evolution, through technology, through what have you, we do know how to teach. We know how to get a kid how to read. We know how to teach math. We know how to get there. We even know what the right schedules are of what we need for our schools. We need to stop fighting about them and start implementing those. And let's stop making testing a bad word. We don't need to go overboard with testing as we have before. We don't need to make kids and everybody so stressed out that they're going to lose their livelihood if kids don't get such and such score on a test. But we do need to have accountability. It's like if they are at this grade and we have ensured that standards at this grade say you need to know this, this, and this, let's believe it. Let's get them there. Let's do it. And let's focus on that. Let's get what we know to be true and let's really start implementing it and stop making excuses of why it can't happen. Those excuses weren't made for me. They weren't made for you. It didn't mean we didn't have problems back then. We still did. And I can't get over how many kids that were with huge problems when I was growing up became full productive members of the culture with great families, with great stuff that's happening. That's a story of our society. That's a story of America. We're able to do it. And I think instead of giving crutches and excuses, let's give tools to get us to that next level.
Love it. And thank you so much, John, for coming on. Dr. Tanner. I know you don't want me to call you that. This has been a great conversation and one that I've just been waiting to have for a long time. People are going to probably be looking for your book on that cheating scandal. What is that called and how can people contact you about it?
So the book is called Bombshell in the Barrio. It is on Amazon. When we wrote it, we were so fearful of the people who were attacking us that we actually didn't even, it's three of us who wrote it. The author is called Parisia Press. Parisia means truth to power. And that's what we did. So it's Bombshell in the Barrio. What's been interesting is how many college professors, at least in Texas, are using that book quite often in their classes.
Love it. John, thank you so much. And listeners, thank you for tuning in once again to Progressively Incorrect. Let me know what you thought of this episode in the comments or by messaging me. Make sure you spread it around and give this show a 5-star rating on the platform of your choosing. I really appreciate all of you for supporting me and just continuing on this journey. Take care.